It was a cold morning in the heart of the city. The sky was gray, and the rain fell like whispers from the heavens, soaking the streets with silence. Cars passed by in a rush, their tires splashing through puddles that had no end. People held umbrellas and hurried past, never stopping to notice the boy standing quietly beside a trash bin. His name was Tafari, a 10-year-old African boy with dark skin, worn-out shoes, and a heart that had learned to endure hunger more than once. He had no one, no mother, no father, no home. Just a shelter bed, a memory, and a small pendant around his neck carved from wood. The only thing left by the woman who once called him son. He walked slowly down the wet sidewalk, his small feet cold and aching. He wasn't begging. He never begged. Tafari believed that even in pain, there must be dignity. And so he searched the streets for empty cans, loose change, anything that could help him buy a piece of bread before the day ended. But then something stopped him. Just ahead, by the edge of a bench, he saw it, a black leather wallet, soaking. In the rain, it looked expensive, untouched, forgotten. He picked it up gently, wiping the water off with the sleeve of his old hoodie. The wallet felt heavy in his hand, not just with weight, but with something more. Something he didn't understand yet. He opened it. Inside was a bundle of clean bills, neatly folded. Several cards, a driver's license, a photo of a man standing beside a white car. And next to that photo, a smaller one, of a woman with eyes that looked strangely familiar. Tafari's breath caught. His hands trembled. He closed the wallet, and then he ran. Not to keep it, not to hide it, but to return it. Because even when the world had forgotten him, Tafari refused to forget what was right. He ran through the rain, past the blinking traffic lights, holding the wallet close to his chest like it was something sacred. The name on the ID stayed in his mind, Robert M. Ellis. There was an address too, printed clearly on the license. A street far away. A part of the city Tafari had never dared to walk. He didn't know who this man was. He didn't know the photo of the woman inside was more than a stranger. He didn't know that this small act of honesty was about to change his life forever. He only knew one thing. He had to return it, and he had to do it now. But as Tafari crossed the final street, he didn't see the black car speeding around the corner. It was too late to move. The sound of tires, the flash of lights, and then everything went black. The rain had stopped. The city grew quiet again, but not for Tafari. Somewhere between the screech of tires and the cold of the pavement, his eyes slowly opened. His body ached, and his knees were scraped, but he was alive. A kind woman had pulled him to safety, shouting at the driver who never even stopped. Now she was gone, and Tafari was alone again. The wallet was still in his hand. He stood up slowly, blood dripping from his elbow. He wiped it with the back of his sleeve and looked ahead. The address was only one street away now. He could see the tall iron gates that guarded the wealth he had never known. The houses on this road were not houses. They were mansions. Quiet, shining giants with trimmed trees and driveways that sparkled under the wet sunlight. Tafari walked closer. The gate of the house stood wide, with golden numbers on the stone wall. 4275. The exact address printed on the ID. He stopped at the gate. The mansion inside had high windows and a wide lawn. Empty but perfect. There were no dogs, no people, just silence. And then he saw him, a man standing near the doorway, dressed in a long black coat, holding a coffee mug in one hand and a phone in the other. His hair was thick with gray, and his face looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from the kind of sorrow that never leaves. He seemed powerful, untouchable, the kind of man who had never walked barefoot or gone to bed hungry. Tafari stepped closer to the gate. Something about the man made his heart beat faster, not in fear, not in excitement, but something Deeper. He raised the wallet in his small hand, hoping someone would see him. But no one looked. Tafar. I didn't speak. He couldn't. His voice was always swallowed by the world. So he walked around the side fence and sat under a tree across the street, waiting for the man to come out, watching the front door like a child watches a miracle unfold. Hours passed. The man never came outside again, but Tafari stayed, because something inside him whispered that this moment was bigger than hunger, bigger than pain, bigger than the cold. He didn't know this man had once loved a woman in Africa. He didn't know the woman in the photo was that same person. He didn't know that the pain in the man's face came from the child he had lost long ago. A boy taken by the tides of life, never to return. But he would know soon. Because behind the silence of the gate, the truth was already waiting. The wind picked up that evening, brushing dry leaves across the sidewalk. The sky was turning gold and pink, casting long shadows over the mansion. Tafari was still sitting under the tree. His body was tired, and the cold reached deep into his bones, but he did not move. He kept the wallet close, as if returning it was more important than breathing. And in his heart, he felt something strange. Not fear, not confusion, but a pull, as if this place, this man, this moment, had always been meant to find him. Across the street, the lights in the mansion turned on, one by one. Inside, the man moved from room to room, unaware that the past was watching him through the branches of a tree. His name was Robert Ellis, a man whose success could not silence the ache in his soul. Years ago, he had fallen in love with a young woman named Abeba while traveling through a small African town. She was kind, full of life, and carried dreams bigger than her village. But he left, called back to America by duty and ambition. He promised to return. He never did. And when he tried to find her again, she was gone. He never knew she was carrying his child, not until it was too late. Now he lived with that truth buried deep inside, hidden behind his wealth, behind his silence, behind the photo he kept in his wallet, the only photo of Abeba he had left. He looked at it often, and each time the regret grew heavier, but he had no idea that the boy outside was the very reason her smile had faded. Inside the mansion, Robert set down his coffee and walked into his study. He opened his drawer, searching for his wallet. Gone. He froze. He retraced his steps, checked the car, the kitchen, the hallway. Gone. His hands trembled. Not because of the money, not because of the cards, but because of the photo. The photo was in that wallet, the only piece of her he had left. He grabbed his coat and rushed outside, scanning the ground, retracing his path from the morning, and that's when he saw him, a small boy across the street, half asleep under a tree, holding a black wallet in his lap. Robert's heart stopped. He walked toward the gate, slowly, but before he could speak or move any closer, something caught his eye. Hanging around the boy's neck was a small wooden pendant, carved, old, African. Robert blinked. He had seen that shape before, many years ago, around the neck of a woman who once held his heart. He stepped back, his mind spinning, breath short, hands cold. Could it be? No. It couldn't, but the past had found its way home. Asterisk. The street had grown quiet. Only the hum of distant traffic and the rustling of trees filled the air. Robert stood still behind the gate, his eyes locked on the wooden pendant around the boy's neck. It was small, worn smooth by time. But he knew that shape. A circle wrapped in lines, hand-carved, just like the one Abeba had worn the last time he saw her. He felt the world tilt beneath his feet. His memories, long buried, now rushed forward like a flood. The night in that African village, the way she had smiled under the stars, the way she had pressed his hand to her belly, whispering a hope he never lived long enough to hear. He had promised to return. He had sworn to write, but letters were lost. Plans were broken. And by the time he came back, the village was empty. He had searched, but time had closed the door. Now, standing only a street away, a child. This child wore the same pendant, the same curve, the same wood. Even his eyes. Dark, wide, carrying the quiet strength of the woman he once loved. Robert stepped back. His hands trembled. He couldn't breathe. The boy did not notice him. Tafari had finally drifted into sleep beneath the tree, holding the wallet gently across his chest. His arms were wrapped around it like a treasure. His head rested against his knees. The world may have ignored him, but he still protected what didn't belong to him. Because inside him, something stronger than poverty lived, something born of truth. Robert didn't move closer. He couldn't. Not yet. He returned to the house and opened an old wooden box on his shelf. Inside were only a few pieces of the past. A letter, a photo, and another pendant, the twin of the one Tafari wore. He held it in his palm, and for the first time in many years, he wept. Not with noise, not with sound, but with the kind of grief that rises from knowing you left something behind. And now it might be too late to hold it again. He spent the night by the window, watching the boy across the street, watching the wind press against his small frame, watching him shiver beneath the stars, too proud to knock on the gate, too used to the world turning him away. When dawn finally came, the boy stood up. Tafar. I brushed the leaves from his shoulders and held the wallet in both hands. His knees were weak, but he took a deep breath and walked toward the gate one more time. Robert saw him coming. This time he opened the gate, but he said nothing. He only stood there, frozen, eyes locked not on the wallet, but on the boy's face. Tafari raised the wallet without a word. Robert took it. Slowly. Their hands touched, just for a second. And in that second, something passed between them, something silent, something sacred. A feeling that had no name. But it was not the end. Because what Tafari did not know was that inside that very wallet, hidden behind a slip of paper, was a letter. A letter written long ago. A letter addressed to a son. The house was still. No servants, no noise. Only the ticking of an old clock somewhere deep inside the walls. Robert sat in his study, the wallet now resting in front of him. He had not opened it yet. He couldn't, not with the boy still outside, waiting like a shadow on the edge of something he didn't understand. Tafari stood near the gate, unsure whether to walk away or stay. He had done what was right. He had returned the wallet. But why did his heart feel heavy, as if a string had tied itself between him and the man behind the door? Inside, Robert finally found the strength to open the wallet. He pulled out the cards, the folded bills, the photograph of a baba. And then, tucked behind the last slot, he found it. The letter still sealed. Yellowed by time. He had written it. Years ago. Not for anyone else. Only for the son he never met. A son he believed was lost to the past. He never mailed it. Never spoke the words aloud. He only wrote it in silence, as a way to keep the memory of her alive. And now, by some hand of fate, the very boy who returned the wallet might be the one it was meant for. He opened the letter. Each line was a whisper from a younger self. A man full of regret. A man who had loved once and failed. It spoke of a baba, of the nights they spent under the African sky, of how he always wondered if their child had lived, grown, laughed. The letter ended with one sentence that burned into his soul. If you ever find this, know that I never stopped searching for the part of me I left behind. Robert pressed the letter to his chest. Tears fell again, silent and slow. Then he stood. He opened the front door, walked past the columns, and down the steps to the gate. Tafar. I was still there. He looked up, confused. Robert didn't speak. He kneeled, slowly, and reached for the wooden pendant around the boy's neck. Tafari pulled back, unsure. But Robert, with trembling hands, reached into his coat and took out the second pendant, identical, old, carved from the same wood. He held it beside. The one Tafari wore, a perfect match. Tafari froze, his lips parted. His breath caught. The man's eyes, wide, trembling, were not filled with anger, not pride, but something Tafari had only seen once. In the photo of the woman he barely remembered, it was the same look, a look of recognition, of belonging. Something deeper than words, but before either of them could speak, the gate behind Robert creaked. A black car turned into the driveway. A voice from inside shouted his name. Robert stood quickly, slipping the letter into his pocket. Wiping his face, Tafari stepped back into the shadow, just like he always had. The moment was gone, but the truth had already been born, and neither of them could unsee it now. The wind rose softly as the black car rolled past the gate and into the driveway. Tafari stepped behind the stone pillar, hiding his face from view. The man, Robert, stood frozen, heart still racing, letter still warm in his pocket. The moment that had cracked open the edge of truth now threatened to disappear into silence again. Inside the car, a young assistant stepped out, holding a briefcase and calling Robert's name. Business awaited, meetings, contracts, the usual weight of a life built on power, but Robert didn't answer. He simply nodded and waved the assistant inside. His eyes returned to the street dock, to the place where Tafari had stood just seconds ago, but the boy was gone. Across the road, beneath the tree, Tafari had crouched low. He watched the man carefully. His heart beat harder than ever before. Not from fear, but from a feeling he didn't know how to name. A heat in his chest, a question in his bones. Why did the man's hands shake when he touched the pendant? Why did their eyes lock like that, as if something invisible was trying to speak between them? Tafari had spent his whole life without a name to call father. Now, a whisper deep in his soul spoke of something impossible, but he was just a boy who slept on cold beds and searched for food in trash bins, a boy who had no place in mansions or memories. Still, he didn't walk away. He watched Dot and Robert, still standing by the gate, slowly reached into his coat and pulled out the photo from his wallet, the photo of a beba. He looked at it again. Then, with the pendant still in his other hand, he whispered her name into the wind, a beba. The name floated across the street like a secret, and Tafari heard it. He rose slowly from behind the tree, his heart pounding. He had heard that name before, not from people, not in books, but from dreams. Sometimes, when sleep came gently, he would see a woman with soft eyes, humming a lullaby in a language he didn't understand. And sometimes, in the middle of the song, the name would come like a leaf falling from the sky. A b b b a Tafar. I stepped forward. Out of the shadow, Robert looked up. For a long moment, neither moved. There were no words, only silence between them. But the silence was not empty. It was full of memory, full of blood, full of all the things that had been waiting to rise for 10 long years. But before Robert could take a step, the pendant slipped from his hand and landed on the ground. Tafari picked it up. And in that second, as their hands touched again, the truth reached both of them like a wave too strong to stop. But the wind changed. And suddenly, behind them, both, someone else was watching. A figure in a black coat across the street. Unmoving. Face. Hidden. Watching. Waiting. As if the story of Tafari's life was still not fully written. The morning light crept over the city, soft and golden. It touched the rooftops, the sidewalks, the leaves of the old tree, and finally, it touched the boy standing quietly with a pendant in his hand. Tafari didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the man before him, not with fear, not with hope, but with a stillness that felt like waiting for something to end, or to begin. Robert took a step forward, but before he could speak, his eyes flicked past Tafari, across the street. There, beside the corner lamppost, stood the figure in the figure. Black coat, still, silent. Something in Robert's chest tightened. It wasn't the press, not police, not a stranger passing by. No, this was different. The figure's presence wasn't accidental. It was too deliberate, too still, like someone who had been following for a long time and had now decided to be seen. Tafari turned to look, but the figure was already gone. The space they stood in moments before now held only dust and shadow. Robert looked down at Tafari, really looked. The boy was thinner than he should be. His skin stretched over his frame. His hands were calloused like someone twice his age. Yet in his eyes was something Robert hadn't seen in decades. Courage, not the kind built by words, the kind built by surviving when no one sees you. Robert's voice rose in his throat, but he swallowed it. There were no words big enough, no sentence powerful enough to say, "I might be your father," to a child who had spent his life being forgotten. So instead, he opened the letter he had once written for a son he thought would never read it. He unfolded it slowly, placed it into the boy's small hand, and closed his fingers around it. Tafari looked up, confused, but did not let go. Robert then took the pendant from his own pocket, the one that matched the one Tafari wore, and gently laid it in the boy's other hand. No explanation, no speech, because the truth was already there. The letter, the pendants, the photo. Everything that had once been broken now stood whole again. Tafari looked at the items in his hands. The letter trembled slightly as he held it. He could not read every word, but something in the paper felt familiar, like a voice he had waited his whole life to hear. But before either of them could step closer into the truth, a sound broke the silence. Glass shattered. A loud crack echoed through the air. Robert turned sharply toward the mansion. Smoke, a flash of fire. The kitchen window was in flames. Tafari's eyes widened. Chaos began to rise. Shouts came from inside, alarms, screams, but it wasn't an accident, because on the ground, near the bushes, lay something small. A bottle. Broken. Burned at the edges. Someone had thrown it. Someone who didn't want the past to heal. Someone who had been watching, waiting for this moment. Robert rushed toward the house. Tafari ran behind him. The fire was real, but it was only the beginning, because some truths are powerful enough to rebuild, but others are dangerous enough to destroy.